Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. The title of this session kind of speaks for itself. The whole term homework help site is the term that students see more likely than contract cheating, a term that isn't necessarily familiar to them. And so we're going to talk today a bit about kind of defining what contract cheating is, contextualizing it, talking about some best practices for educating our students, recommendations for assessment design, detecting contract cheating, and then proving it. So let me just kind of start by saying that I am unabashedly, completely biased when it comes to this topic. I'm not objective. I have a strong dislike, is to put it mildly, for these services, these contract cheating services, which prey on our students. And so if you're expecting some kind of unbiased perspective on this, you're not going to get it from me. So just kind of be warned. So contract cheating is a relatively new term to the conversation in academic integrity, meaning that not everybody in the faculty is even familiar with the term. In Policy 60, it's defined as contract cheating occurs when a third party completes work with or without payment for a student who then submits the work as their own, where such input is not permitted. So with this kind of broad definition, that could be asking your mom to write your paper for you. But for the purposes of this conversation, for the purposes of this presentation, we're talking more about services that are paid for. And we'll focus a lot on Chegg, but I'd like people to be thinking beyond Chegg when we're talking about some of this stuff. So some examples of contract cheating services. Chegg is one. Bartleby is another, which is actually an offshoot of Barnes & Noble Education. Grammarly is another one, which and we'll talk a bit more about how these companies manage to prey on our students. But Course Hero, Stack Overflow for coding and things like that, Homework Market. There's also services where they'll take the whole online course for you. So eStudyProf, We Take Classes, both of those, what you do is you go to the website and you provide the syllabus for the course, and then they assess it, analyze it, and decide how much work it would take and provide a quote. And then if you agree to that payment, they do the entire course for you online. As well, there are freelance sites that are perfectly legitimate freelance sites, meaning people writers and designers, and that post their services up there. But it's also a mechanism for having project work done and having papers written and all those kinds of things. And then finally, LinkedIn, we've seen a couple cases come in where students just solicit through LinkedIn somebody who has the right background to do work that they need to get done. So Chegg, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the students who were trying to cheat, who want to cheat, and the students and the mechanism for cheating? I'm not sure. I will say that Chegg started off being fairly innocuous. So it was originally just kind of textbook rental. And then study guides, and now it offers a full range of services, and you'll see that there's quite a bit of writing support there, which we're not going to focus on, but I'll just say that the two big things that you want to know about or take note of when it comes to writing is that, one, anything that the students submit to Chegg for plagiarism check, for example, gets added to their database for use in whatever way they so choose. And I can promise you that Chegg is working on AI, artificial intelligence, to automate a lot of the kind of things services that they're selling to students now. As well, I want to draw your attention to the professional proofreading with the advanced suggestions, and that's the tricky part there. So it's not just somebody saying, hey, there's a lot of comma splices, or asking the kinds of healthy questions that would be asked in, say, the Writing Center at Ryerson, like, can you explain what you're trying to say here? Or, in the writing center, they're going to ask those kinds of questions instead of making statements like you should write such and such and give them the words, right? So that's where you run into the problems with the writing. The big issue though with STEM and where they're making all their money is STEM support. So they have a math solver service for $9.95 a month. And they have the expert Q&A plus textbook solutions for $14.95 a month. Or the value pack, where you get pretty much everything for $19.95 a month. Chegg's, where most of our exams are being compromised is through the expert Q&A service that Chegg provides. And I do want to just kind of point out that I looked online to try to figure out how people get hired for Chegg. I wanted to see what their vetting process was. And the only mechanism I could find anyways for applying for a job on Chegg as one of their experts is through India. This is actually kind of good news, and I'll explain why a little bit later. So just to give you a sense of what they do, Ask an Expert subjects that Chegg offers, you can see it's quite advanced. We're not just talking about like high school level courses. It's quite advanced and it's all STEM related. So how Ask an Expert works, for some reason that's really hard to say. All the student has to do is take a picture of the question on their phone, and then it gets posted, and then they post it on Chegg, and then the experts go at it, right? And you'll see that you can get an answer in as little as 30 minutes, but they average 46 minutes. That's a caveat.
And can I just say, it's John Paul, just really briefly, a lot of faculty members who've engaged in this process have said that students have had answers posted in as little as 5 or 10 minutes. So it is almost as if some students are having their test on for them pretty much in real time.
Konstantinos, I confirm. Yeah, it can be quite fast. So let's see how Chegg's doing out in the world financially. When the pandemic started, before we went online, the Chegg shares were $34. Revisiting a year later, $113. Chegg is doing very, very well on the backs of our students and the backs of our institutions. And this doesn't factor in a fraction of the cost, really, because you can consider the cost to our students in terms of the courses they have to retake, the suspensions, lost future income, the cost to our institutions in terms of the impact on retention. It's I can't even begin to figure out how to calculate that. So I did try one time. So how they get away with it and how they kind of are preying on our students. They have masks of legitimacy. So for example, Chegg, in the US, and I just learned this recently, in the US, one of the major student loan providers is a company called Sallie Mae. So pretty much if you have a student loan in the US, it's from Sallie Mae. Well, Sallie Mae is giving you a free 6-month subscription to Chegg when you get that loan. Students read that as almost an endorsement from the institution itself, and you can understand why. Barnes & Noble Education, which is the home of Bartleby, that other service that I mentioned, and one that you're going to want to keep your eye on because they do not provide the reports that Chegg does, so students may be flocking there. Bartleby has partnerships with the university bookstores all over North America. As well, the companies infiltrate social media, so those math chat groups that the students are in, which I would argue are ultimately very healthy if they would just get the heck out of them during assessment time. They're infiltrating those. They're also, I recently learned, offering to sponsor academic clubs, math clubs and stuff. And I just learned this at a conference that somebody had been reached out to for that. So a lot of these things the students are getting it from a lot of different directions, I guess I should say. And in some cases, the messaging can be a little bit confusing. With that said, I'm not suggesting that students don't realize that buying an answer is wrong. I'm just saying that that they are being preyed on. So what can we do to educate our students? Acknowledge the factors that contribute to bad decisions, right? So we know it's not that we're not talking about bad students, we're talking about bad decisions. So acknowledge the kind of circumstances that can lead to that. Students are very anxious, they're very insecure, especially as first and second year students. The move to online classes can create a real emotional, intellectual disconnect from the student to the content, right? There's no opportunity for relationship building with the professor. And when you don't have a connection, it's easy to make that shift to kind of ethical disengagement. So, so kind of acknowledging those things, just talk about them and say them out loud to the students and offer alternative responses to the factors, right? Make sure that they know that, you know, they can get an extension if they need it. There are accommodations, that you do want to talk to them, that you do want to know them, those kinds of things. And and you'll notice in the chat, John Paul is mentioning at the conference that we had, there were a number of presentations on Chegg. It's a major topic in the academic integrity world. And it felt almost like we were infiltrated because there was a person from Chegg who was there. And what was it? Faculty, what was their role again? Director of Faculty
Director
Relations,
of Faculty
right?
Relations. Yeah. So they're essentially a PR person.
Right. And we're in all these meetings talking about how Chegg is, you know, the downfall of academia as we know it, and that Eric, you can say whatever you want. I'm not advocating that choice. So anyway, that person was there talking about the different supports that Chegg has support faculty. But we'll look at those and I'll explain why I find them problematic. Okay, so I'm also going to put forward contract cheating statement. Yes, so I'm going to put forward a suggested contract cheating statement. And this is just a recommendation. You can make it look like whatever you want to look like, but I'm going to read it and then I'm going to talk you through why the language is what it is. So in regard to any and all assessments in this course, the use of Chegg or any other homework help site or service will be pursued as contract cheating under policy 60. In regard to any and all assessments in the course, the use of any third party, e.g. family member, freelance roommate, to complete work on your behalf will be pursued as contract cheating under policy 60, academic integrity. Policy 60 penalty guidelines for contract cheating that impacts only you, like viewing a solution on Chegg, F&, course. Policy 60 guidelines for contract cheating that facilitates cheating for others, e.g. posting a question on Chegg, disciplinary suspension. So there's a couple of things that we're trying to do with a statement like this. One, there's no hedging. It's very, very straightforward, very bold. Two, we're trying to educate in terms of language. So students need to understand, first of all, that Chegg and homework help sites are contract cheating, and they need to learn that term contract cheating. They also have to, and the reason why they need to know that is because contract cheating is a very different thing in policy 60 in terms of penalty guidelines than regular cheating. And so we're trying to be very, very explicit and educate them in that respect. And for the penalties, I'm not going to lie, they're supposed to scare the students. The thing here is not to tell students this after the fact, it's to tell them before. This is not the same thing as copying and pasting a sentence. This is very different when you hire somebody to do your work and students. And so the statement is really meant to drive home the seriousness of it, so that they get that it's better to fail a test than cheat. Like if they're gonna fail, if they think they don't know it, in some situations the logic will be, well, I'll get an F anyways, so why not try? they need to understand that the F in the exam is not as bad as F in the course, that F in the course is not nearly as bad as a disciplinary suspension. And so let's see, that's my sample contract cheating statement. And I put this as a Google Doc on the AIO faculty resources folder, which I'll share with you folks after the presentation. So preventing contract cheating. I really do want to say, though, that everything you do in prevention of this should be broadcasted widely. The idea here is not to trick students and catch them, but rather to deter them, to make them understand that there are things in place to prevent this, so that they think twice before doing it. So one thing, and you've been hearing about this since the beginning of our move to online, is frequent low stakes assignments. Also, I don't know why my link didn't transfer over here. I'll fix that up for you. The center did a great presentation called Design Questions for Online Assessment. It was by Paula Borden and Julia Gindrich. And this was a link, but I would encourage you to look at it, because it talks quite a bit about how you can create, just how you can kind of amp up your assessment questions such that they're less conducive to cheating. Also, I know a lot of you are already doing this, and we learned a lot from watching the way that you're doing it. Multi-layered randomization in your exam. So not only the question version, but the multiple choice options, as well as the multiple choice sequence. When you have that multi-layered randomization, basically every student, even in a class of 200, ends up with a unique exam. Another thing that we've kind of learned just through experience is that you can restrict access to data sets and support documents via Google Drive. And then when the person who's been hired tries to access them, you find out. So the students are less likely to give over their sign-on information for all their university stuff to somebody else. And they just don't think through the fact that the person's not going to be able to access those documents without permission.
Alison, can I just give a really quick example of that we had this week?
Sure.
A faculty member contacted me asking my advice, because what had happened was exactly as Alison has just described. A data set for a given assignment in this faculty member's class was posted on Google Drive, so you needed to log in with your Ryerson email to get access to it. And the faculty member received an access request from an unknown email. So when she contacted that email and said, "Can you just clarify who this is?" And they wrote back saying that they were from this company and they had been hired to do the assignment by student X. So there's a very real and simple example of how this is happening, and how just by putting this on Google, this faculty member was able to A, prevent, and B, detect what was happening.
Yep.
Sorry for interrupting, Alison.
That's not interrupting. That's helpful. I tend to not tell enough kind of stories to help illustrate points. That's happened several times actually too, and I did just see the one that came in, John Paul. How many students at Ryerson? I should have came with numbers. Alison. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so it's John Paul again. So we track numbers of suspicions of misconduct that are registered with the Academic Integrity Office. So we recently had a policy review where we added the language, specifically contract cheating, to policy 60. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to be able to track the numbers of suspicions relating to contract cheating that were coming into us. So we report the academic year, our numbers in the academic year, and so that begins September 1 and it goes until the end of August. So last year was the first year that we started tracking contract cheating, and the numbers were, it was fairly low. The number of instances, I think it was just a little under 100, However, I'll be very clear in that I think that is a low estimation. And I say that for a lot of different reasons. Number one, not everyone is familiar with this language, right? So some of the instances that were registered with us, they may have been miscategorized. So they were perhaps categorized as plagiarism or cheating, which they may in fact have been. Another thing, very real reason, is that contract cheating can be really, really difficult to detect. So across the sector, we have a good sense that there is much more contract cheating happening than we are aware of. And that is something that we are trying to work on as a sector, not just at RART, to try to figure out how we can prevent and how we can detect it. So specifically, the numbers are quite low, but I really think they're very much an underestimation of what's actually happening.
Yeah, I would say, okay, so though, John Paul, just a caveat, you said the numbers are quite low. They're quite low in terms of being labeled contract cheating. One, a lot of times because faculty don't even know the term, and so they just put in cheating. Two, cheating is often confused with contract cheating because they're not getting at the source. They just know that the student did something that they didn't actually prove their own knowledge. And three, as Constantino said, we saw a major spike in this, obviously, when we turned to online. Yeah, major spike. And we saw mass cases where, to the point where faculty had to consider whether they were going to keep the exam or not. So there's that's I mentioned the multiple Forbes magazine. Yes. Oh yeah. And Forbes also did a story on Chegg and its skyrocketing value. Kazem, will come back to normal. I suspect that it will drop quite a bit, assuming that the thing is that once you make a decision to use a service like that, it's easier to use it again. So I ultimately, I think when we're back on campus, that there's going to be a little bit of, there's going to be changes. It'll never be the same. It'll never be the way it was before. And then two, we're going to have students coming onto campus who've never gone to university on campus, right? First and second year students who have never set foot on campus, never taken a live exam. And so it's got to change things, but definitely the live in-person exams makes this kind of thing impossible. So let's see. One thing I forgot to mention, incremental exams. So this came up with at the conference I was attending. It's this idea that Chegg's average response time, and I know that sometimes it's faster, but Chegg's average response time is 46 minutes. So what some people are doing at some institutions is having, putting like 2 questions in each exam and only making them available for a shorter period of time. So in each section, so section A of the exam has 2 questions and they only have access to that for 30 minutes or things like that. So that's another mechanism. My thought on that, Merab, would be that it is contract cheating because it's the online source, right? So Chegg, and we'll go back to this Chegg infiltrating our conference. Chegg has this face of legitimacy, right? And they have an honor code, and that's why they provide reports to us when we ask for them. And they also have this thing called an honor shield. Can we put it under policy 60? Let's definitely come back. John Paul, can you make sure we don't forget that question?
Yeah, sure. If I'll keep an eye on this and we can loop back.
Okay. So they have something called an honor shield where faculty members can choose to upload their exam and let Chegg know what time it's going to be going, what day and what time. And then Chegg will block those questions from being posted during that time frame, which sounds okay, possibly. But so from what I've read, number one, you can get around it because they'll let students post with any minor variation on the question so that it's not exactly the same. And 2, Chegg will not give any kind of written statement about what they're going to do with your exam once they have it. And again, I can guarantee you Chegg is working on AI that is going to automate a lot of the supports that they provide. So by providing your exams to this machine, you're running the risk of feeding it. Okay, so detection. We've done all, so let's say you've done all the things you can do, hopefully to educate students and put in your kind of mechanisms for prevention. So detecting, there's 2 different paths that can go forward or backward. Honestly, it's easier to go from the online source to the student's work when it comes to Chegg than the other way around. So a lot of faculty members are monitoring Chegg during exams, or they certainly check Chegg prior to exams to make sure their questions aren't already there. Then they monitor during. Sometimes they just wait until after and look to see if the questions showed up. If you find stuff on Chegg, and again, I should broaden this. We're not talking just about Chegg, so don't search just within Chegg. Search in Google, so you're finding these other services that do the same thing. Focus on unique language in the question. And try to use unique language in your questions so that you can find the questions when they come up. Compare the solutions to your student solutions. When you're looking at that, you're not just looking for exact matches because it's easy enough to switch out variables or whatever. So you also want to be looking at the approach to the problem as well. And this is where we come back to this idea of the fact that they're hiring mostly people from India, at least from what I can discover. The way they teach the same material in India is not necessarily the way they teach the same material in Canada. And as a result, you'll see different approaches to problems. So that can be one way of recognizing that something is afoot. Going the other way, where you're actually going from the student's work to online, you want to be looking for an unexplained spike in student performance. I think a lot of people saw this more when we first switched to online. Look for approaches, as I said, to the problem that were not taught in the course. Look for any kind of unusual notation, and then, the Google search. The reason why I say, though, that going from the online source to the student's work is easier, at least with Chegg, is that there's lots of, because we already have the mechanisms, thanks in large part to the Faculty of Science and the work that they've done on it, we have all the pieces that you need to kind of do an efficient investigation around Chegg. And Fatih, yes, definitely. I'll tell you in 1 minute. So there's a Chegg investigation request. That's a link right there. What you're going to do is you're going to complete this template letter, and this was really based on the Faculty of Sciences template letter. That's perfect. Which anybody can fill it out, but then you need to get it to your associate dean for signature, and then you submit it to the link up there for investigation request. You can also do the takedown request for copyright. I should warn you, though, that I just learned that when they take down content, they don't actually take it down, they just stop indexing it. So what that means is that it still exists on the internet, it just won't turn up in a search engine. So fill out the template letter, have your associate dean sign it, send it to Chegg via the honor code investigation request link. At the same time, when you're doing that, fill out this data request form from D2L, and specifically make sure that you're asking for the student ID, IP address, start time and end time for their exam. Or conversely, if you're looking for unique questions on a single student's exam, you can ask for a full exam report. Once you do that, Chegg within a few days will send you a report. The report is, it will show all the accounts that posted the questions you identified. And the account information will include the user ID that the student provided, the institution, if they provided one, the IP address of the student, and the email address associated with that account, and the timestamp of when it was posted, which I think is in California time. So just be aware of that when you're looking at the timestamp. They'll also provide, yes, they also provide the viewers as well. And it's the same set of information, what time, what their accounts are, IP, et cetera. So you have this Excel sheet, and then you get the information that we mentioned from D2L, the student ID, IP address, start time, end time for the exam. And then it becomes pretty easy to just kind of cross-reference and see which IP addresses show up, and which email addresses seem to match your students' names and things like that. So that's a way to identify large scale for sure, with actually less work than trying to look at every question that every student submitted and compare it. The limitations, not all contract cheating companies will provide reports. Chegg is one for now. I don't know how they get away with it, because they're giving out, it's a violation of privacy, but it's not us violating it, it's Chegg. The fact that they're giving out IP addresses and all that, but most companies won't. So that's why I think that Bartleby and the others will become more popular as we go forward, because they won't provide those reports. There's some evidence that reports may not be comprehensive. And when I say evidence, I say anecdotal, because I don't have, I've just, at the conference, a number of people said that if they went back and requested the report again, the information that they got, it would never have false information, meaning like if Joe Smith was on the report, Joe Smith definitely was on Chegg posting that thing. But if they repeated the report, they redid it for them, Joe Smith might not show up. So they're not falsely identifying, but they're not necessarily comprehensively identifying. It's not in their best interest. They lose business. Exactly. Yeah. So Constantino said he experienced that himself. As well, it's really not that hard to get around the protections even that Chegg has in place for what they're worth. For example, if a student uses their phone on cellular to post the question, and they're on Wi-Fi on their computer for the exam, that's 2 different IP addresses. As well, there are several mechanisms for third-party unlocks. And what I mean by that is you don't have to have a Chegg account to get some question answered on Chegg. All you have to do is pay somebody 25 cents on Reddit, or Discord servers there's a bunch of Discord servers where people do it for free even. So when that happens, when those third parties are the ones who are posting the questions and getting the answers for everyone, then there's no way to track it back to your students, except unless you can identify that the answer is a copy.